Finance Committee will come to order. Today, the Finance Committee meets to discuss the Biden administration's commitment to protecting and strengthening Social Security. Commissioner O'Malley, thank you for joining us. Commissioner, I think it'd be appropriate to begin to say, you barely got there, and we're still finding your way around the offices, and you've taken more concrete action to help seniors and improve operations in your early administration than the vast majority of your predecessors. At your confirmation hearing, we pressed you on the urgent need to address this scourge of overpayments. They have been forcing already struggling seniors and folks of modest income to pay back thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars because of a mistake that was no fault of their own. No American who lives on a fixed income, struggling to balance the grocery bill against rent and utilities, can afford to pay a large bill back to the government. Now, it's appropriate just to have a little history of this as we get into talking about this with you. A few years ago, I wrote a law requiring the Social Security Administration to modernize its systems with one kind of lodestar, and that was to prevent overpayments. For years, Social Security dragged its feet on implementing these changes that I mandated by law. Many of the recent problems with overpayments that we've all been hearing about in our states could have been prevented if the agency had implemented these changes sooner. Now, several weeks after you were confirmed, you said what you were going to be about was bringing Social Security into the 21st century. And you said you were going to get these new systems up and running this year. And colleagues, what this does is it significantly streamlines the Social Security program for all those folks, all those seniors that we represent, because the changes allow the agency, for example, to get wage data quickly and efficiently and accurately. And that is front and center, a requirement to prevent overpayments. You promised swift action, and you are already starting to show real progress. Not only on big pressing problems like overpayments, but you haven't shied away from diving right into some of the smaller fixes that Social Security needs to have. Listening to employees and seniors, you're making concrete changes that, in my view, and Mr. Commissioner, as you know, I go back with seniors to my days when I was director of the Gray Panthers, and I had a full head of hair and rugged good looks and all that. And you're making changes that are going to make it easier for seniors to sign up for Medicare and improve customer service. And you've said that if there's a problem, no matter what size it is, you're going to go out there and focus on fixing it, improving service, getting checks out the door faster to the older people that need them. In my view, when it comes to these challenges, there's a clear choice to make, and you and I have talked about that. You either let a broken system just continue to upend the lives of older people, or you can tackle the problems head on. And as far as I can tell, you're taking the head-on option, going after these things aggressively from the start. Now, let's talk for a moment about the president's budget. He released the budget and reaffirmed his commitment to protecting seniors, Social Security, and that he would oppose any cuts to Americans' hard-earned benefits. Now, that's quite a difference to what the Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination has said. On the same day, on national television, the Republican frontrunner said there was, quote, a lot that could be done on Americans' hard-earned Social Security and Medicare benefits, quote, in terms of cutting. So that, I gather, is his platform, because that's what he said. Cut the programs, let everybody else pick up the pieces. Obviously, Social Security is on top of everybody's mind. with respect to protecting the program and particularly making sure that it's solvent. And I intend to work closely with my colleagues to ensure that we protect Americans' hard-earned benefits for decades to come. A piece of that, Mr. Commissioner, will be making sure billionaires and the ultra-wealthy start paying their fair share. And as we start this discussion, let's be clear on this. I want everybody to know I am a capitalist. I want people to be successful. That's the American dream. We want people to do well. We want people to be successful. We also believe that it's important that everyone, including billionaires, pay their fair share. And my billionaires tax proposal has close to 20 senators as co-sponsors now, and it's going to start that effort to make sure the ultra-wealthy pay the taxes they owe, help close the gap to ensure seniors can depend on the lifeline of Social Security. One last point, just a quick step down memory lane, colleagues. The Finance Committee hasn't held a hearing specifically on oversight of the Social Security budget in over a decade. We said when you were nominated, Mr. Commissioner, we were going to change that. You're giving us that opportunity to do it. Today, we can get an update on the Biden administration's efforts to address ongoing challenges within Social Security, and we can also hear from you about the changes that you're focused on making in the program in the days ahead that make for a more solvent program and protect what we consider to be the Social Security guarantee. President Biden's proposed budget for the coming year shows his commitment to the Social Security guarantee, to protecting seniors' hard-earned benefits and making sure the program has the resources it needs to improve customer service and better serve the American people. Thanks for helping to get things back on track, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden, and thank you, Commissioner O'Malley, for appearing before the committee this afternoon to discuss the President's fiscal year 2025 budget for the Social Security Administration. I, too, appreciate your efforts, the commitment that you made to us, and the efforts you're undertaking to strengthen and restore our Social Security. Commissioner O'Malley, during your nomination hearing, you committed to making customer service improvements at the SSA a top priority. During today's hearing, I look forward to hearing more about that, your approach to addressing SSA's ongoing challenges with wait times for the National 800 number, processing times for disability decisions, and improper payments. The data and metrics you are looking at to evaluate your progress and how the Biden administration's budget request for the SSA supports these efforts. Average wait times for the National 800 number have ticked down slightly over the last few months, but still remain above 30 minutes. After years of delays, the Social Security Administration has successfully transitioned its National 800 number to a new phone service platform. While the budget highlights the expected benefits of this new phone system, the Social Security Administration must do more to ensure that future information technology projects make responsible use of taxpayer dollars by being delivered on time and on budget. Americans across the country continue to wait for too long to receive a disability decision from the SSA. The President's budget proposes addressing these wait times through hiring and retaining state disability determination services employees and seeking process efficiencies, including improved technology. The budget also highlights a proposed rule the agency claims would improve its disability adjudication process by reducing the number of years of past relevant work SSA considers when making disability decisions. While SSA's disability rules do need revisiting, simplification should not always result in more mandatory spending. SSA should also focus on updating the outdated occupations list used in making disability decisions to ensure the correct applicants are receiving benefits. Social Security Administration has already spent a substantial amount of time and resources on this update, and I urge you to stick to your commitment of making this update a high priority. During your nomination hearing, senators on both sides of the aisle underscored the need for SSA to do more to reduce improper payments. Last month, the Social Security Administration took an important step toward implementing the Payroll Information Exchange provision in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. Once this new exchange is in place, it is expected to improve payment accuracy and reduce the self-reporting burden on beneficiaries. I also understand that the Social Security Administration has been reviewing its policies and procedures to identify what more can be done to help prevent and address overpayments. I look forward to hearing more about these efforts today. As SSA continues this work, the agency must be careful to address the initial errors, not just waive the mistakes after they have occurred. While the President's budget includes operational requests for Congress to consider, it also fails in addressing Social Security's long-term solvency. The Social Security program provides benefits to millions of seniors, individuals with disabilities, and their families. We must ensure current beneficiaries and future generations will be able to depend on the program and address its financing shortfalls. The President's budget does not include any legislative proposals to back up his stated commitment to protect and strengthen Social Security. The solutions preserving it are increasingly difficult as more time is wasted. Thank you again for being here today, Commissioner O'Malley, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. We now turn to you, Commissioner, for your opening statement. I understand that you are going to use some slides for members to follow along with your testimony. Your testimony will be made part of the record, as well as the slides you provide to members. Welcome.
Awesome. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee, thank you for the honor to be able to appear before you today. And Senator, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing on our budget. It has been 9 years since we have had any hearing on Social Security's budget, and it's a great honor to be here with you to share with you a little bit about what I've learned. I have been on this job for 90 days, and I have been most pleasantly surprised by just how anxious the senior executive service was for a confirmed leader. They want to do better. People all across the country, I visited all 9 regions over 16 days in January. The employees want to do better. They consider themselves, performing a sacred mission for all of us, and indeed they do. So while I've learned a lot, and we have a lot in motion, including the payroll information exchange, that will be advertised very shortly. We hope to have it up and going by July. The 15 to 5 year look back, which will hopefully simplify a lot of the administrative and wait times involved in the disability program. But I wanted to share with you right up front, and it's one of the lead slides I shared with you in the material I gave out to you. One of the things I've learned, and I see the symptoms of it and the effects of it every single day, is that Social Security is now serving more customers than ever before, with fewer staff than Social Security has in 27 years. You might be surprised to learn, or perhaps not, I know I was, that Social Security operates today, now, on less than 1% overhead compared to its annual benefit outlays. And this operating overhead has been cut effectively by 20% over these last 9 years. If one were to compare this social insurance agency to the private sector, companies that are also on those slides, like Allstate, I believe, that operates on about, let me make sure I get it right. Allstate operates on approximately 13% of its overhead compared to annual outlays. Liberty Mutual, Liberty Biberty, operates on about 22%. Social Security Administration, at least up until 2018, operated on 1.2. So, as I have traveled around the country, this is, I wanted to share with you, mindful of my time here and wanting to answer your questions. I wanted to announce to you a few of the things that we're doing on those key customer service issues, namely the 800 number wait times, time to disabilities, and thirdly, the injustice of the overpayments. We have a new team in place, and within 30 days launched Security Stat. Security Stat is our new performance management regimen. It operates on an every 2 weeks cadence. 8 different meetings focused on one topic, not only the 800 number, not only the disability determinations, but also one blessed hour on fraud, the prevention of fraud, and the OIGs at the table as we strive to get inside the turning radius of the fraudsters. We have one blessed hour that's committed to reducing those initial disability determinations as well. We have one entirely focused on notices. We send out notices that look like the old Mad Libs, except these are designed by mad lawyers over time. And we can't blame our seniors when they receive the notice, or anybody, and they can't make sense of it. The only thing you can make sense of on some of our notices is that if you don't understand it, you should call our 1-800 number and wait for 39 minutes. So these are all of the things that we focus on in Security Stat. Let me wrap up with the focus of one of these meetings, which is overpayments and underpayments. Many of us saw that 60 Minutes expose about Americans who, through no fault of their own, received one of these indecipherable notices, did not respond to it, and then found Social Security was intercepting 100% of their benefits every month until we recouped the overpayment. These stories are shocking to our shared sense of equity and good conscience, and so today I'm announcing some new reforms on that score. Many of these reforms came from our own employees on the front lines, and a brilliant woman named Leanne Stever, who has helped us unpack and get to the root causes and the true facts underlying this. First, instead of intercepting 100% of benefits, in those instances where beneficiaries fail to call us to work out an overpayment plan, instead of intercepting 100%, we are going to do as we have long done in Title 16 SSI and intercept only 10%. Second, we're going to shift the burden away from insisting that the claimant prove that they were not at fault. Instead, that burden will be more rightly on the agency in determining a fault. Third, we will allow repayment plans of up to 60 months. Traditionally, we only allowed repayments of up to 36. At the VA, they do 60. We're now going to do 60 as well. And finally, we're going to make it easier for overpaid beneficiaries to request a waiver of payment. In conclusion, we have discovered many things to improve process, many things to improve technology here and there. But if continuing to reduce staffing while increasing beneficiaries is only going to lead to more difficulty for all of our customers. I have every confidence that restoring customer service levels at Social Security here and now will provide a dividend of trust for generations to come. The President's budget is a big step in the right direction on that score. It includes a 9% increase over last year of $15.4 billion. And with those dollars, we are confident we are going to be able to reduce the wait time on the 800 number. We are going to reduce the time to disability determinations, and we're going to do a much better job on reducing the numbers of overpayments and the injustices that result from them. So I look forward to working with you and diving deeper into any areas that are of interest to you. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. And let's go to this payroll information exchange concept first, because it relates to kind of how you showed up here. You made some big promises to tackle overpayments head on, and I'm sure seniors and others kind of hear this stuff coming from Washington and they maybe roll their eyes a little bit and they'll say, we'll see. But we are now on our way to having quicker, more efficient policies to prevent overpayments because the agency can get wage data, can get this from employers and others quickly. And it just seems to me that after years and years of waiting, And as you and I talked about, I worked across the aisle to get this passed, and then basically nothing happened. Nothing. We just kind of kept pushing the agency, and nobody got serious about getting this wage data and recognizing the importance of efficiency and the like. And you took this on. So tell us, if you would, because you're going to have a comprehensive game plan fighting these overpayments. What are we going to do for the long term? What are we going to do right now? And I'll ask another question about, helping people who are in a bind right now. But tell us how this payroll information exchange, the data exchange, is going to help you prevent overpayments for the long term, and we can finally get this problem that has harmed so many seniors under control.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your question. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for pushing us on the payroll information data exchange, in essence. As I traveled around the country, visiting all 9 regions in the first week of January, I always found the best ideas came from people that were on the front lines already doing the work. And one of the constant questions that I received in kind of like employee town hall fashion was, when are we finally going to have PI? When are you all going to do regulations to finally do the payroll information exchange? Because it'll alleviate our work burdens, it'll make for less overpayments. In some of our programs, I'm thinking of SSI especially, it is a income-based program. People have to verify that they are making below a certain amount. And if they have a job, they have to be careful not to go above a certain amount of earnings. Otherwise, it triggers potentially an overpayment, adjustments, and things of the like. And with ever declining staff over the years, it has taken us longer to catch up with overpayments or changes in income or living arrangements or the other things that have to go into that program. So we have been doing a lot of prep work that will allow us to use a big data solution, to use contracted with a company called Equifax. And even as old as our legacy systems are, we have done the work necessary to integrate our efforts across all the field field offices and processing centers with Equifax's database. So if a claimant, client, customer signs up and gives us permission to verify their wages through Equifax, we won't be waiting for somebody to come in with their latest pay stub. We won't be waiting for somebody in a processing center to put it through a scanner, to have it connect up with the file. Instead, it will happen instantaneously. We hope, therefore, we will be able to, in real time, identify where a situation that could have led to an overpayment is popping up, and we think it'll be a great relief on both the administrative burden internally, the administrative burden on customers, and lead to greater accuracy.
Let me see if I can get 2 more questions in quickly. By the way, Mr. Secretary, I thought you'd be interested. The original idea for payroll information exchange came from one of your employees, a Social Security employee, who took it to our office in Eugene, Oregon. So this idea, we're very proud, has roots.
I don't doubt it.
So there you are, payroll information exchange for the long term. What's the most important thing you can do to help somebody who's clobbered right now by an overpayment?
Well, some of those things we just announced, which is, and there are more things that will be coming. 75% of overpayments are under $5,000 or less. And 92% of people actually call us and work out an overpayment. I have sat there with people at Social Security listening on the other phone as clients ask, hey, I can't make the $200 every month. Can you allow me to do $100? So we have good people at Social Security, good people in the field offices, and my message to people across the country, if they have had an overpayment, is call us, contact us. I know it's hard with fewer staff, but we do answer the phones within 5 minutes in the 1,210 field offices across the country, and they're compassionate people on the other end who now know, receiving clear instructions that we need to act in with mindful of the damage this can do to individuals. We have a lot of flexibility as an agency that you've given us, not to claw back in cruel ways if it is against equity and good conscience or defeats the purpose of the very act that you're sworn to uphold.
Let me get one other question in very quickly because I'm already over my time. Tell us a little bit about the funding picture, because I know that you're looking at ways to beef up the very best possible customer service for seniors and others. What are you going to try to put your resources in, and where are you going to need some additional help?
Yes, sir. Having been mayor of Baltimore and having been a governor during a recession, I honestly was taking with a grain of salt some of the news I was reading about the agency saying that it was suffering from a lack of funding and a lack of staffing. But when I got in there, that has been the most unpleasant surprise of all. To see the staffing going down now to 27-year lows while the number of customers continues to rise. When I was here before you in October, we were serving 68 million customers. We're now serving 71 million customers. So if you are able to pass the president's budget, these are the things that we would do with those dollars. We would invest in frontline staff, $269 million of that. We would invest in staffing back up our teleservice centers, which suffer from a 24% attrition rate. We would address a backlog in the processing centers. That's where $85 million would go. We would eliminate the hearings backlog with an $89 million increase. An area where we're especially suffering, and probably the largest dollar amount on here, honestly, is the initial disability claims backlog. It is reaching historic highs. People waiting for their initial disability, and that, as you know, is a 50 different state problem. In some of your states, you have attrition rates that are so bad that in some states, 85% of the people that work in disability examinations are trainees. So our productivity is taking a hit, our staffing is low there, and we need to beef up our DDSs. And finally, information technology. It's people, it's process, but it's also technology. And 90% of our technology budget goes to taping together green screens and IBM systems from 40 years back. We need to modernize our technology investments.
Senator Crapo, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to follow up basically a little bit on the line of what you were just discussing. I was very interested in your chart that shows, for example, the wait lines on the 1-800 number and what it could be. It could go from 38 minutes to 5 minutes. Same thing on disability decisions and hearing decisions. The question I have is, this chart says that with 1.2% of benefit outlays as a level of funding, that you could take the wait times on the 800 number from 38 minutes to 5 minutes. Is that just hiring a lot more employees? Do you need, what are the actions that you would take with adequate funding to move that number from 38 minutes to 5 minutes?
We need to, a big part of it actually is the agents taking the calls. There are things we can do with tactics on either side, deflecting calls, getting more people to go online. And there are things we can do once we do answer the call, resolution on the first call rather than making people call back. But there is no substitute for all of us Americans who call and say, I want to talk to an agent, I want to talk to an agent. If there aren't enough agents, it's going to be a long wait time.
So what is 1.2% of funding outlays? What amount of dollars is that?
The president's budget calls for 15.48. That's about 90. That's about 0.96 of 1%.
Okay. So and yours is your recommended budget is a little higher than that.
The officially recommended budget was higher than that at about 1 point. It was higher than that, and here it is. It was $16.2 billion. The 1.2 that I had on that graph was to show that prior to 2018, that was the pretty consistent level of overhead compared to annual benefit outlays that allowed us to support customer service at the level that Americans, frankly, have already paid for through years of working
So
and
just,
in their
again,
FICA.
just so I can understand what it is that would be needed here, would your $16.2 billion budget get you to 1.2% of funding, of of benefit outlays?
No, sir, not yet.
Would it get even close?
It would the president's budget would be a solid step in that direction. The budget that was my recommendation, which was honestly kind of in motion before I was confirmed, is another positive step in that direction. It would take other successive steps over the years to get us back to 1.2.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the difference between your budget proposal and the president's. What are the primary differences between your request, which is about 0.8 billion higher, and what areas do you think need additional funding beyond the president's budget that would have been included in your number?
Yes, sir. It's a matter of scale, but I think the priorities are the same.
Okay.
I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea of where the backlogs are, where we're failing our customers, and where we need to restore staff most urgently. Absent that, we find ourselves playing whack-a-mole, shifting every day, taking trainers off of training them, throwing them in the front office, and doing other things that are bad overall for the productivity and the efficiency of the organization.
All right, thank you. Moving to a different topic, information technology. I understand that you have been known to say that technology is the cause of and the solution to all of our problems. I appreciate your recognition of the critical role that IT plays in the Social Security Administration's operations and your acknowledgement of the challenges that the SSA has had with it in terms of its project over the years. During your nomination hearing, you said that if confirmed, you would do a rapid assessment of SSA's IT systems with a focus on how these systems serve the agency's customers and employees. What's the status of this assessment, and what can you share on your findings to date?
Yes, sir. That assessment is underway, and we just hired a new CIO on March 4th. There was also a modernization plan that was put forward before that by the outgoing CIO, but we have experienced and insightful people from MITRE that are doing exactly that assessment. It's not completed yet. They've only kind of just begun their work. I would have liked to have hired a CIO before March 4th, but that was her first day. She's very good, Marcela Escobar Alava, and all of that is underway. In fact, we're already shifting things. For example, PI, we had to shift things from one aspect of the IT budget in order to make sure that PI started on time. But that overall evaluation is underway, and there will be short-term and long-term things that we need to do. Over the longer modernization goal should be to get to a modern customer relations management platform that allows the American people the same level of customer service they get when they're calling other corporations in the private sector or their own insurance company or their own bank.
Well, thank you. I'll be very interested in that assessment. I'd appreciate it if you'd give us some updates as you move along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Governor, I hope you had a good St. Patrick's Day.
It was.
When you came before the committee in November, I asked you about your commitment to improving payment accuracy. As you know, my office has heard from beneficiaries who have received letters saying they must pay back thousands, or in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars to the government. I've been pleased to see your demonstrated commitment to addressing overpayment inequities, but there's more work to be done. This issue spans from a challenging appeals process, low staffing that leads to beneficiaries receiving bills that date back 30 years, and challenges around payroll data. How will the President's budget help address this multifaceted problem that leads to overpayments?
Yes, Senator, thank you for your question, and thank you for urging us forward to do even more. The things that I announced today about moving away from the 100% intercept, on the default position, shifting of the burden, all of those things will make a difference. There's still other things that we need to untangle and figure out with regard to administrative finality and the like. But you kind of put your finger on one of the problems, and it's this. We have not seen more citizens being assessed overpayments, but we have seen the time it takes to assess the overpayment grow, and therefore the debt itself grow because of the shortage of staff and the extra length of time it takes before we discover it or before we're able to contact the person and make arrangements. So,
And that's simply not fair.
pardon?
That's simply not fair.
What's not fair? That we should have staffing, that it should take us that long?
That the time frame that it took to ultimately make those determinations have added to a cost that otherwise would not have existed.
That's true. It's not fair. People have paid for their customer service. It comes out of the same trust fund it always has, back when it was 1.2%. And so you ask, what would the president's budget do for us on that? It would allow us to restore many of the staff losses that will allow us to narrow that amount of time. So as I said before, 75% of the debts in the Title II OASDI are $5,000 or less. 92% of people get a hold of us, but in an agency this big, if you're harming 8% of the people, that's a lot of people.
Well, I look forward to your work in this and to hearing as you go along if there are other things that need to be done. I'd like to know. I'm sure members of the committee would.
Thank you, Senator.
A CBO report from last month has yet again proven that certain right-wing voices claiming that immigrants are so-called takers who drain our nation's resources are blatantly wrong. Here are a few excerpts from the report. Immigrants will grow the entire U.S. labor force by an extra 5.2 million workers over the next 10 years. Over the next 10 years, our GDP will be about $7 trillion larger, and our federal tax revenues $1 trillion greater than they would otherwise be without these immigrants. The report confirms that America's prosperity and financial security depends upon the enormous contributions of hardworking immigrants. And as more and more Americans retire, new immigrants eager for work opportunities will help fund our Social Security system for all Americans. And so even though undocumented immigrant workers contribute billions into our Social Security system to keep it solvent for U.S. citizens, they do not receive a single dime in benefits from it. So do you agree with the CBO's findings that immigrant workers continue to be essential to keeping our Social Security fund solvent?
I sure do, Senator.
Okay. And that's a point that often goes unreported in a way that I think is part of the consideration that we should have. Finally, when applying for SSDI or SSI disability benefits, individuals report that they have spent years with little or no income working through the system, only to see their application rejected. They also describe dehumanizing, extensive, and highly confusing paperwork. And a recent report from the Center for American Progress notes that only 33% of applicants for SSDI and 32% of applicants for disability benefits with SSI were awarded benefits at any time in the process, largely due to extreme administrative burdens and delays. What can you do as a commissioner to reduce the red tape and extreme barriers that individuals with disabilities face when they are trying to collect the benefits to which they are entitled?
Yes, sir. There's rarely a day that goes by when we are not wrestling with the complexities of this program, both in disability determinations and especially in SSI. The supplemental security income is about 40% of our 4% of our benefit outlays, but it's about 40% of our administrative overhead. This program seems to get in its own way. In other words, while it purports to be a program of last resort for the poorest of people, it forces the poorest of people to jump through hoops, stand on their head, and gargle peanut butter in order to qualify for it. So there are things we can do to simplify SSI, some of those things are underway. The movement to electronic signatures in the agency, it can play is part of that. But the larger problem is this. It is a very staff-intensive program to administer, and it is an income-based program, and our staffing levels are at a 27-year low. So in addition to being a complex program, it's also facing the same sort of understaffing challenges that the whole agency is facing. Thank you.
I thank my colleague, Senator Grassley.
Yeah. Remote work is a problem throughout the federal government, not just with Social Security. But I want you to know that I hear from Iowans that are getting in-person assistance at field offices is a real challenge. And I recently read about your organization entering into a memorandum of understanding with the employee union that expands this episodic telework. So how are you going? By the way, I think this is something you and I discussed when
Yes,
you
sir.
came to my office. I didn't try to get a commitment out of you on anything on that point, but I did want to point out to you how I thought that your predecessor probably lost his job because he was taking on this effort to try to get more people to come to the office. So how are you going to serve seniors when there's even more remote work than there is now?
Yeah, Senator, let me share with you that on February 2nd, we changed our telework balance, and this is the sum and substance of it. I said, look, I'm here 5 days on site, 5 days a week, every day of the week, and if I'm not here, I'm in one of the regions or catching a Dawn's Early Light flight. My commissioner's office, the commissioner's office at headquarters, is there 4 days a week, 1 of telework. All of the other components, 3 days a week, 2 of telework. Now, the field offices have been open 5 days a week, 9 to 5, ever since the shutdown ended. That's a fact. We also do a pretty decent job of getting people appointments within a reasonable time. We can debate what reasonable is, but they also answer the phones in the field between 3 to 5 minutes. So, but this item that you touched on, the episodic telework, was simply this. When I was I can't remember whether I was in Kansas City or San Francisco, a young dad who worked at our teleservice centers said, my son was really sick. I needed to get him to emergency care right away, but my wife was coming home and was going to come off her job and relieve me. I asked my supervisor, could I come in and work the second half of the day? And she said, no, we don't allow that sort of episodic, granting of a half day or something. And so when it came time for us to bring everybody back to the regional headquarters, everybody back to the Baltimore headquarters for more days, the question was asked, are we going to allow them to take a personal half day and telework on those days if some calamity happens, sick kid, a flat tire or something? And I said, well, sure, we're not monsters, we're human beings, life happens. And they said, well, what about for the union organized workforce? I said, don't they already have that? And they said, no. I said, well, that's not fair. I mean, do they not have sick kids? Do they not have flat tires? So I don't want that to distract you, though, from the larger movement, which is to have core collaboration days at the headquarters, to keep those field offices open 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and to make sure that we see people. We're doing all of those things, albeit with a lot less staff than before, but we're not going backwards and doing more telework.
Both Trump and Biden are running on a campaign of not cutting Social Security. I think that's a stupid thing. They aren't serving the future generations they should by running on that sort of a platform, but that is their platform. And obviously, if they do nothing, they are not going to cut it in the next 4 years. But we all know that by 2033, based on what your studies show, that it's going to go from 100% down to 77% of scheduled benefits. Now, is that a cut to you? I'm not asking what Trump and Biden would say about it, but if you go from 100% to 77%, isn't that a cut?
Absolutely. If Congress isn't able to avert it, as you all did in 1982, that would be a real hit to people.
Yeah. The Social Security Act requires the Board of Trustees, which includes the Social Security Commissioner, to report on the trust fund financial status by April 1. It's frequently missed. Can Congress expect that report April 1st, and if not, why not?
Yeah, we were hopeful that we were going to be able to get it to you, but there was data from the U.S. Census that was late arriving, so we won't make the April 1st, but it will come shortly thereafter. It'll be a delay of a few weeks, but not a few months.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank my colleague. Senator Carper's next.
Yep, thanks very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be
It's
back.
great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you for taking this on. And part of me kind of envies you for taking an issue, taking on a challenge of this magnitude, and really jumping right into it and getting a running start. So congratulations. We're here to help, and we're grateful for your service in this regard. I thank the chairman, and I thank the ranking member for bringing you back before us so soon. I think it was in 2023, this committee considered your nomination. Seems longer, but it was 2023. But we're pleased. I was pleased to support your nomination, but really pleased to see the strong bipartisan support that it received. And for the first time, I think in close to 10 years, our committee is meeting to review the budget of the Social Security Administration, which has a responsibility to provide support for our seniors and individuals with disabilities. As you mentioned in your testimony, amid historic underfunding and understaffing, the Social Security Administration is facing what we call, and you probably do too, a customer service crisis. The average hold time, we've been discussing this already, but I'm told the average hold time for an individual wanting to speak to a staff member at the Social Security Administration is 38 minutes. The average American waits about 220 days. It's over 7 miles for an initial decision about their disability status. These numbers are more than disappointing. They're shocking. They're just not acceptable. If they are true, I would leave that up to you. But Social Security Administration's programs can't succeed without first delivering gold standard service to all of our Americans. I'm encouraged that the agency is maybe prioritizing serving those with greatest needs and ensuring disability applicants with the most severe conditions are given an initial decision within 30 days or less. The last time you were good enough to appear before our committee, I recommended that you talk with Danny Werfel, Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. And like you, he's inherited an agency with a customer service crisis. And while I know you have got a tough job ahead of you, I'm encouraged the President's budget for fiscal year 2025 makes critical investments to customer service at the Social Security Administration. My question is, should the President's budget be enacted, how would you leverage this investment to improve the agency's customer service? You talked about this a bit already, but especially for reducing call and disability claim wait times. And can you speak to the unique customer service challenges the Social Security Administration is facing and how the agency, Social Security Agency, can learn from Danny Werfel's success at the IRS?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator. The President's budget is a very, very strong step in a better direction for this agency's customer service. Of the $15.4 billion proposed in the President's budget, our plan is to increase frontline staff serving our customers by $269 million, to increase the staffing at our teleservice centers. They have an attrition rate of 24%.
A year?
In our teleservice centers. You can only imagine the sort of stress that people encounter on an underperforming system when people have been on hold for 45 minutes or an hour. Nobody's coming in pleasant after waiting on hold for benefits they've already earned. We plan to invest $85 million to bring down the backlogs in our processing centers. Some of you no doubt get calls from people that said, I got a notice from Social Security saying they should process my claim in 30 days. It's been 90 days. I haven't heard anything from them. So we've got to get those backlogs down. The biggest investment would be at the initial disability stage. 50 states, Delaware, Maryland, Louisiana, all have their own DDS offices that make the initial determinations. Those backlogs have grown and grown and grown. In fact, in my prepared remarks before you, I believe I have a map of the United States with the 50. That map is supposed to be shaded. The green is supposed to represent states that get it done in 120 days. There is no green on the continental United States. Across the South, particularly, acute backlogs. So that's why we would invest $2.8 billion to staff up the DDSs where attrition has been great and where half of their staff seem to be in training status and therefore not as productive as they could or should be if they fully, had a grasp of the material. We're doing some other some things with technology, but none of those things can make up for the yawning gap between having the highest number of beneficiaries in our history and the lowest staffing we've had in 27 years. We're getting a lot of great sort of bunt singles to get on base in terms of process efficiency and automated Medicare processing and things like that. But those are bunt singles. Only Congress can hit the home run of restoring our staffing and ideally making quick strides to get us back to that 1.2% of average outlays that we had always had been before 2018.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Next is, let's see, Senator Cassidy.
Hey, Mr. O'Malley. At your nomination hearing, I noted how the Social Security Administration is relying on a 50-year-old dictionary of occupational titles. I smile because when you read some of them, they're clearly anachronisms. The agency has spent over $500 million paying the Bureau of Labor Statistics to come up with an updated occupational data file and spending another $100 million on staff and contractor time testing the file. Senator Brown and I introduced a bill requiring SSA to compile this and submit a report every 3 years. Where are you, where is the agency on implementing the updated occupational titles?
Yeah, Senator, there seems to be no end to the ongoing outlays of money proposed for an updating of the dictionary of titles. I've kind of put the brakes on this, frankly. It's a lot of money. And I think with the availability of technology and data sharing and other things that are out there in the world, I think we need to take a fresh look at whether we can get from point A, which was last updated, I guess, in 1991, to a more modern system without necessarily having to send out giant teams of researchers to do 103 more side-by-side studies for 2 weeks of cashiers and what the physical requirements are for it. There's a level of complexity here, yes, but I think to continue to put more and more money into doing this the way we've been doing it and have no result doesn't make a lot of sense given our budget throws. So I've asked to hit the pause button on this while we reevaluate and see if there might be another way to get it done.
Well, it wasn't under your authority, but if we spent $600 million and accomplished nothing, that's incredibly frustrating.
Hugely frustrating.
So let me ask you, then that leads me to the next thing about modernizing your legacy systems, your technology systems, et cetera. And specifically, how to use AI. In healthcare, we're trying to use AI. I say that as a physician. For example, the National Health Service in England has used AI to screen people with mental health issues, and they found a greater degree of satisfaction among the screenees, and they found that when the doctors and nurses received the record, they were better done than had a human done them. Mm-hmm. Now, this seems ideal for your backlog. You're having a hard time hiring people. We have a labor shortage. That would be something that could be done, and perhaps even a better file if it's the same experience as National Health Service. All that is a lead-in. To what degree is the agency updating their systems with an eye towards AI, not just for that, but for fraud, et cetera? Turn it to you.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of areas ripe for this, and our top, I would say, training priority has actually to do with using an automated system in the disability determinations. There is a tool that SSA invented called Imagine. And Imagine essentially takes those 1,000 pages of medical records and puts them in a form that can be searched and be curated and compared to past applicants to see, even assess, what is the percentage likelihood of this one being an allowance? Make sure you take your eyes to page 912 of this report, to page 702, because that's where the parts are about what the claimant has been assess with.
Now, this is an AI system or an algorithm. Is this something which you developed in-house, or is it something that you contracted for?
Yeah, it's something we developed in-house. Victory has 1,000 fathers because it works right and because it reduces time by about 50% that it takes to examine all of these records. There's people inside the agency that say the agency invented it, and there's a contractor that says they invented it.
Okay, let me ask you, almost out of time, but going back to that 1.2, you mentioned that you have a very relatively low overhead. But
Yes,
again,
sir.
AI has the potential to further lower that. And so to what degree are you also using AI to look at fraud, to look at, again, having intake of patients with complaints? The whole kind of backlog of complaints could be brought down if it turns out that you could use AI to interview the individual and to, as
Yes,
they've
sir.
done elsewhere.
As part of our security stat regimen, one of the hours, in fact, it's the only hour that we close to the public and don't put live stream, is about fraud. And one of the things that we have been able to do in fraud is to use machines to identify patterns, to identify anomalies. We need to do a constantly better job of that, but we do have models that do work, and we need to refine those models. So we're looking for needles in a needle stack instead of needles in a haystack when we refer cases and flag cases back for a second review in the field office.
Well, I'm out of time, but that's your aspiration. I guess my question, though, is to what degree are you employing AI or other tech in order to help do that? Because that does seem something, that pattern recognition, that seems to be tailor-made for that which we could use AI
Yes,
for.
we are already doing some of that. We can do more, and I think we can do more immediately when it comes to geospatial and identifying emerging hotspots on the map, or like the impossible medical days and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Langford is next.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for being here in the conversation. I know you jumped into the deep end of the pool with a lot of areas. Be able to resolve some things. My state is one of the states that's working with the driver's license data verification system that we've been very behind on. Social Security has been very helpful to us in the process of going through, so I just want to give you kudos.
Hey, thank
Get
you.
a chance to be able to hear that we're working through that. That's some been on our state's responsibility and some on yours, but we seem to be getting very close on that. We do have a lot of constituent requests that are coming in on the issue about overpayment. When they get an overpayment statement and they're asked to be able to go track down work history and records and how much they were paid from years ago, it's difficult, obviously, for them. They've got to be able to work this out to be able to figure it out. The challenge has been not that they've got to go chase all that stuff down. That's part of the process for them to be able to figure out. It's the communication on the backside of that. It's, do they have a person they're working with? Can they get in contact with him? Can they maintain communication with that person consistently, trying to be able to work out the details? That's still an ongoing issue to try to figure out. It's confusing enough for a lot of folks that are trying to be able to handle an overpayment situation, try to be able to chase down records. It's more confusing when they deal with different people in the process to be able to resolve it. So as much as we can maintain the consistency of that, an open line of communication, that'd be helpful.
Great, well said. And I think the best thing for people to do is to get to their field office when they have one of those notices. You can work out a payment plan, I think, by calling the 800 number or eventually getting connected with the debt collection folks. But the best thing to do is to go to your field office.
Yeah, and many people have the opportunity to be able to do that. We're obviously improving those options, but it is its own challenge when you're in a rural area and difficulty traveling and all those things.
Sure.
So a couple of handoff issues I just want to be able to raise to you. One of them is years ago, and I'll leave out all the wheres and the whys on this just to protect her in the process, but I was walking through a Social Security office, and I think you and I have talked about this before in my state, walking through the cubicles, just meeting people, asking what they do, trying to get some insight from them on what we could do better. And one of my favorite answers was someone who said to me, when I said, "What do you do?" And she replied, "I do something the federal government shouldn't do. That's what I do." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" She said, "Well, I spend my days trying to figure out how to pay attorneys that I didn't hire, and someone who hired a disability attorney. In fact, they hired 2 or 3 attorneys, and I've got to figure out what percentage to pay each person." Somehow we've got to figure out how to be able to manage this, because obviously the good staff that's at Social Security, they don't have any relationship with all these attorneys. yet they're having to actually choose which attorneys to be able to pay what amount and to be able to track through all these bundles of records as they fight through the process on that. So that's something we just got to be able to figure out together on how to be able to resolve that and to be able to make that easier. The other thing is dealing with some attorneys, not all, some attorneys that stretch out the length of a process because they know if they stretch it out to the farthest point, if they ask for delays, if they show up at hearings and try to submit one more record, it forces that to go a little bit longer. There's a maximum amount that can be paid, and if they can stretch out the whole proceeding, they can get to their maximum amount. We've got to be able to figure that out as well. I understand that some people want to be able to hire a counsel, but those individuals and those counsels that we see repetitively that are lengthening cases that could be done quickly to be able to make sure they maximize their payments is wrong in a million ways, especially for that individual receiving disability. What ideas have come at this point to be able to identify consistent law firms that are stretching things out to the longest possible way, and we're seeing that pattern for them, and what consequences can we bring to be able to make sure we're protecting the disability individual, not benefiting the attorneys?
Yes, sir. I had heard that same story. In further investigation, I'm not finding a whole lot of evidence of that, and perhaps it's because the wait times have become so horribly long.
Right.
That
it's assumed it's always there.
They're always going to reach their maximum, and just given they have no need to delay the cases. It's also a violation of the professional code of conduct to do such a thing. We have noticed, though, we have shifted from doing hearings primarily as in person before COVID. And then, of course, we couldn't do any in person, so we were teleconference and video conference. Now, even after COVID, the vast majority of our hearings are being done by teleconference or video, which is allowing us to close a few hearing offices as well. We noticed, though, in mapping that there are some regions of the country where it seems that people in the law firms in disproportionate numbers still insist on their personal appearance, in-face hearings. And so we're able to see that on a map. We're able to make some calls. We're able to address it. I think it was less a matter of maximizing fees and more a matter of not realizing how much more quickly they could get clients good results. We also looked at the difference between the two results, in person or teleconference, and found no difference in terms of percentage of allowances.
Thank you. Let me just make a couple quick statements here. I want to be able to follow up on the record. One is the difference between administrative law judges and administrative appeals judges. Obviously, there's a big difference between the two. I have some questions because I understand Social Security is leaning towards more administrative appeal judges, and I just want to be able to do some follow-up on that. And the other one is the transition from SSI to SSDI for those teenagers making that transition. I've talked to several folks that are talking about the length of time that it takes. I wonder if there's a way to be able to expedite the hearing when you're actually making that transition to be able to make sure that those that are transitioning from SSI to SSDI, because obviously there's two different standards there. Many don't qualify in the next level, and I want to make sure that we're actually managing that handoff well. We can talk about that later, or I can try to submit that for the record.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor O'Malley, Mayor O'Malley, Commissioner O'Malley, whatever title you're using now, welcome to our committee. It's good to have you here. I note that you have visited all the regions. You've commented about that. I think that's a good thing to do, to really try to understand the challenges that are out there in the field. And I noticed that the next generation of your stats is security stat. And I think that's going to be very helpful for all of us, including your workforce, to be able to have metrics in order to judge the progress that they're making. But I just really want to, this is a hearing on the president's budget. And if I understand, the president's budget would give you a 1.2% for administering the benefits outlays. And I just want to go to this one chart that you presented and make sure I understand this correctly. If we fund the president's budget, one of the major complaints we get is the wait time on the 1-800 number. You're telling us that with those resources, you can reduce the wait time from 38 minutes to 5 minutes. Am I reading that correctly?
I can't say that. What I can say is that we believe that we can bring it down by its current roughly over 30 minutes. It's roughly, The last full week of reporting we had ended March 8th, and it was down to 31, which is a better trend line. We've been wrestling it down. I believe that with the president's budget, we could bring it down another 20 minutes to more like to an 11 or 12-minute wait time.
And then long-term, with that support, you believe you can bring it down to within 5 minutes?
I believe with further strides, we can bring it down to 5 minutes. And in fact, in the field offices, the wait is 3 to 5 minutes for the field offices.
And the other issue that we hear about all the time are the disability determinations, the time from the initial disability or reconsideration decisions, which now goes about 2/3 of a year. You're saying you can bring that down also. Can you just talk a little bit more about the trend line there?
Yes, sir. That's going to be a longer task, involves more training. But in essence, we would plan to use $2.8 billion to restore the staffing losses that have happened over the last 9 years when we've gone without even having a budget hearing or an appropriation hearing. Some of the greatest attrition has happened at our state DDS offices. So we would use that $2.8 billion to hire up again. All of these 50 are state employees, as you know, that our federal dollars pay for. Each of those offices has different leaders and faces different challenges. But if we can we need to get their staffing back up. We've also designated some cadres within the federal aspects of the agency that can help bail out those DDSs, but that's more like emergency work. That's the longer term is we have to get the staffing back up in those DDSs, and that's the biggest chunk of the president's, the additional dollars in the president's budget.
And then the wait time for a hearing decision itself. I'm not sure how the budget directly impacts that. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
It's sort of shocking it's a year for those decisions.
Yeah, I will do my best. There are in essence, kind of 3 stages to a disability determination. The first one is the initial stage. That's a process. It begins with in-person application at the field office, then it goes from the field office to the state DDS. And there it can sit. Used to be 120 days. Now the average time is 228 days and has every indication of rising as their attrition, in fact, rises. If you are denied that, your next level of appeal is to go for a reconsideration in that same state office, which also takes another 220 days.
And how does the president's budget attempt to address that delay?
With greater staffing, we will be able to process more cases more quickly. It's almost like a school system where all of your staffing is in teachers. If you have rising numbers of students and declining numbers of teachers, you're going to have greater class sizes. By way of a metaphor, well, with fewer staff in the DDS, the number of cases per each case staff worker goes up, and therefore the wait times become longer.
I would just point out 1.2% seems like a rather low amount for an administrative cost for a program. I don't know too many private sectors that can administer a program at 1.2%. And I would also acknowledge that we have a trust fund, and you have been disadvantaged because you're counted in the caps that we appropriate for, even though it's trust funds.
Yes, sir.
We believe you should be budgeted, you should have oversight, but why it's included in the domestic spending caps is somewhat a mystery to many of us.
Yeah, I don't quite understand it either. I've never served in the federal service until now, but it would seem to me for all of those years that I worked and you worked and we were paying our FICA, nobody asked us if paying into Social Security was a discretionary act on our part. So I'm not sure why suddenly those same FICA dollars that had always supported a high level of customer service are now, in essence, being cut. Before 2018, we operated on about 1.2% compared to annual outlays. A company like Allstate operates on 19.4%. Liberty Mutual, Liberty Biberty is 23.6% compared to annual outlays. Social Security traditionally had been 1.2%. We are headed to a 27-year low with the highest number of beneficiaries, and it would also be the lowest year in terms of that percentage. Now, the president's budget gets us back up to 0.96 of 1%. Over the next couple of years, you could even now, and it's not really even an appropriation in the sense that it's an allowance. It is allowing us to use the payments that workers have made over the years, not only for their benefits, but for the customer service to access them. And I think 1.2% is not much to pay for high level of customer service for benefits we've already earned.
Thank you. Senator Bennett.
Mr. Commissioner, it's great to see you. Thank you.
Great to see
Thank
you.
you for your willingness to serve. And I know you're new to the job, so what you're hearing today is not many things that you haven't been able to address directly. But I just on that point that you're making about changing demographics, the more retirees, the fewer people to support them. I mean, what do you think we need to do to not just surge more resources at the problem, but use technology and other kinds of things to be able to address this? I mean, we've got in Colorado, I know, more and more people retiring every day. The numbers that I've seen are as many as 400 people are waiting in line for 20 appointments online at a time in the state, and I know that's true everywhere. You've heard that. How do we not just put resources at it, but do it in a targeted way that actually drives systems change that can make sense here?
Senator, you're exactly right in the role that technology plays. It's people, it's processes, and it's technology. And on all three of those, we've suffered from a lack of investment. When it comes to technology, our technology budget is about 1/3 of the size of what you appropriate to the Veterans Affairs, or to the Veterans Administration, rather. In our case, it's 1/3 of that amount for a much larger population, and because of our legacy systems, IBM, COBOL, green screens, and the layers of Jerusalem built upon themselves for the last 88 years, 90% of our technology budget goes to maintenance, what they call the lights on, keeping the lights on. The other 10% goes to product development and modernization. Some of the best modernization are really have bubbled up and back to Social Security from the regions of Social Security rather than something that was done on a nationwide basis. So we need more staff, but we also need to modernize our technology. There are some things that we've discovered that we brought back from the field. I don't think I mentioned this one here. There is when I was in Birmingham, they said, look, we invented this here. This is a way that when people apply for Medicare, we're able to automate a process that used to take a human technician 8 minutes to go through. Yes, that is Mr. Bennett. That's his mother's maiden name. This is, all of those sorts of things, and many, many screens. They were able to build that on an Excel and automate that process so that it happens in 7 seconds. And if there's an anomaly, say an election for Part B, when you wanted to say D, it stops and tells the technician there's an anomaly in the application that needs to be tended to. Now, that will save 40 work years. It was all gummed up for years of not having a confirmed commissioner who could drive things through, Office of Information Security and the lawyers and the policy and all of that. We got it done quickly, but it's 40 work years. We're hitting bunt singles. We're hitting them fast. Some of those things involve better use of technology and automation, but the sort of things that are total system changes, we do not have the money to do. We could, and it would be a good expenditure. We have a little museum up at Social Security. It's only about the size of 2 big rooms. But you go through there and you see Walter Cronkite interviewing the head of technology at Social Security in Baltimore in 1969. And they are so proud that this agency that serves the American people is at the forefront of technological innovation and customer service. That was then, man.
Yeah.
That's not now.
Yeah.
This agency, there's nothing there are no clever tricks of technology that can cross that yawning gap between beneficiaries going like this and staffing at a 27-year low. There are clearly technological improvements, clearly process improvements, but we need additional staff.
Well, I hope you'll let the committee know as you get into this how we can be of greater help to you as well. And I'm not surprised, somebody who's worked at the local level as you have, and as I have, there's a lot of skepticism sometimes of whether a command and control approach is going to get the job done, and the innovation that you're already seeing in the field. I hope you're able to collect that and bring it here and tell us what we need to do so that together we can provide a better level of customer service for everybody.
Hey, thank you. Please come and see Security Stat in Baltimore. You would dig it as a former city guy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much. Great to have you back with us.
Good to be back.
We are, I think, a number of us working here on ways to make sure that Social Security stays solvent essentially indefinitely. I think that if the American people knew that Social Security was going to be solvent into the indefinite future, that Medicare was going to be solvent into the indefinite future, it would have a calming and reassuring effect on folks. It's just an unnecessary asterisk for them to have to add to their family's financial planning to think, maybe, what's Congress going to do? So I've proposed a pretty simple bill that kicks in the payments to Social Security back over $400,000 to honor Joe Biden's promise that he wasn't going to raise taxes for people earning under $400,000. So I would also add that I chair the Budget Committee, and in our hearing last week on the budget, Shalonda Young, who heads OMB, came in and said that this bill was, she said, absolutely in line with the principles that President Biden espoused in his State of the Union. So I think we've got a real chance to deliver that solvency and that security for the American people. And I want to ask you to commit to making sure that your team can give us whatever technical assistance and factual support that we need to make sure we make the best presentation and are working with the best factual information as we try to solve this problem by basically trying to solve two problems at once. One, an unfair and rigged tax code that lets high-income earners off in a way that regular wage earners aren't. And second, the solvency and security indefinitely of Social Security.
Well, Senator, I'd look forward to working with you on that. We have outstanding chief actuary at Social Security, and the work that they do, the analysis they can do, the permutations, parameters, probabilities, we would love to be able to work with you on that.
And it was through your Social Security actuary that we reached the determination that this would keep Social Security solvent indefinitely. Through the entire horizon
yes.
that the Social Security actuary looks, it's solvent and probably beyond.
75 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
The last time this Congress, well, not this Congress, the last time our Congress wrestled with this, the depletion event was only about 2 months off of the horizon.
Yeah.
So hopefully we won't wait that long. It can be fixed. I learned something every day up there, but one of the things I learned, I asked Steve Goss, why is it, what did we get wrong when we said it was going to be 75 years solvent in 1982, but now we've moved that depletion event up to 2034. He said, we got two things wrong. We failed to account for the depth and the breadth of the recession and what that would do. He said, but the bigger problem was the tax reforms that followed the 1982 solvency fix that shoved so much earned income out of the bracket to which FICA applied that instead of it capturing 90% of earned dollars, it only ended up capturing 82 as we chose to concentrate at the very top earners the income growth for the next 40 years.
Yeah, there are two problems. One is the cap, and the other is the ability of very highly paid individuals to divert their pay through an LLC or a shell corporation so that it doesn't come in as taxable wages. And we're going to try to solve both of those ways around fair taxation and do so in a way that takes this worry, is Social Security going to be there? Is Medicare going to be there for me, off the list of things Americans have to worry about. And let me just, in my 40 seconds that remain, commend you for the emphasis you put on customer service. Your colleague over at the IRS has been beefed up with considerable resources for customer service. And I will tell you that sitting down with Rhode Island's taxpayer advocate, they are seeing the results. They are seeing wait times reduced. The taxpayer advocate also has to go get in line with IRS Central to get information. So if they're jammed up at IRS Central for information, even taxpayer advocates have to intermediate between a concerned or irritated taxpayer and the institution. And they're just seeing all their decks. They're just clearing through their backlogs. And it has really been a very, very big deal for ordinary Americans who have to deal with the IRS to be able to see that happen. So make it happen for Social Security too, and we'll have a lot of happy customers.
We can do it.
I thank my colleague. Next is Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much. And Commissioner, I want to thank you for having 2 rounds today. For those who don't know, our aging committee had a hearing with the Commissioner earlier today, and we're grateful for your service, grateful for your willingness to do this difficult job, and grateful for your testimony today. I wanted to try to cover maybe at least 2 issues. One is supplemental security income and child applicants. That's the first issue. It's been well documented that the number of children receiving so-called SSI is 20% below what it was prior to the pandemic. SSI benefits, as you know, are especially important for children with disabilities and for children of parents who have disabilities. Families that include a member with a disability have up to 25% more expenses than a family without a member who has a disability. So those families obviously have financial burdens that others don't. And we know that SSI benefits provide a stable, important source of income to address these additional expenses. And I'm concerned, as I know you and so many others are, concerned about the 20% decrease in child recipients means that hundreds of thousands of families may be struggling to meet the added expenses that a disability can bring to a child and that child's family. In Pennsylvania, SSA and the State Disability Services Office worked to identify children who may be eligible for SSI and let their families know that their children may be eligible for SSI. Nationwide, however, the child SSI applications are only slowly increasing. What is the Social Security Administration doing to address the decrease in child SSI recipients? That's one question. And the other is, how is the Social Security Administration reaching out to families who may have a child who's eligible for SSI benefits so that families can apply for the resources Congress intended for them to have?
Yes, Senator, we did a lot of, it's my understanding, and we've been analyzing the results that this campaign might have yielded. We spent a fair amount of money doing outreach and doing advertising. In your own state, I think your own, as you mentioned, your own government, state government of the Commonwealth, took it upon themselves to do outreach and to do mailers. We saw some uptick overall. I'm not sure that we can say that it was directly attributable to that advertising campaign. It would seem to me that the better approach would be to work with our brother and sister agencies in, at HHS to better target those households, those families, the guardians of those children or parents, And that would, I would think, be the more cost-effective and better way to go. Also, to reach out to schools and school systems. There's a network out there of people that already work with children day in and day out. And I think that that's where I believe we will probably, the direction in which we'll probably pivot is a much more sort of data matching, targeted network approach to reaching the right households with kids that qualify that aren't applying.
Mm-hmm. Well, we look forward to working with you on that to get those numbers up. Like a lot of things in the pandemic, we're still trying to better understand why, but
right.
We look forward to working with you on that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is ABLE accounts. I was able to pass, it's almost 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years in December, legislation with the chairman's help at the time, so-called ABLE accounts, where we changed the tax code so that you could save for a disability just like you save for college. And we had this anomaly in the tax code where literally in the same family, one daughter could have a 529 account where the family and anyone that wanted to help that child save for higher education. Yet her sister, who might have a disability, might go to college, might not, but her sister has a disability and there was no way to save for that sister beyond the $2,000 cap. So we changed the law, and now those families can save up to $100,000 a year. So it makes it possible for example, SSI recipients to save up to $100,000 a year for disability expenses and still maintain SSI benefits. Here's the problem. The number of people with ABLE accounts in the country is only about 165,000. So the eligibility is wide, but the sign-up or those who have taken advantage of it is small. So literally every person who has an SSI, who is an SSI recipient, and who had acquired their disability before the age of 26 is eligible to open an ABLE account. So I'd want to work with you on that. I would ask you, and I can submit it for the record because I know I'm out of time, but maybe we can work together on that. I'll submit some questions about how we can work together.
I'd very much like to do that. I think there might be some interchange here and some play with the kids aging out of foster care as well, and something the agency might be able to do more proactively. I also met recently with the state treasurers of the nation. They were in town 2 weeks ago here, and I met with them and had a lot of conversations. They take pride in administering those ABLE accounts and overseeing them. And so I think we need to do more of the ABLE accounts and less of the other sort of accounts.
Commissioner, thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Casey, and good work for all those disabled kids all these years. Senator Tillis is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Malley, Commissioner O'Malley, Martin, thank you. You know I supported your confirmation process because you convinced me with the work that you've done as a public servant that you get it in terms of transformation. I got a real quick question for you. It has to do with funding. You and I talked about a version of this document. I think at one point we were saying maybe you ought to reverse the order. Because this is probably a trend that bears repeating if you've already talked about it. This used to be pretty close to the service levels before you got whacked on funding, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Prior to 2018,
so in a way, you kind of want to go back to the future.
Yes, sir.
Or
nostalgia is not everything it used to be, but in our case, it was.
Yeah, so I mean, it really is. Are any of these service levels substantially, in the green here where you want to get to, substantially different from when you had the funding streams to actually drive these service level outcomes? Are they roughly the same?
That's roughly where they were in 2018.
Okay, tell me a little bit about, I like the control room that you've set up. Have you discussed with anybody what you're trying to do now in terms of a cadence and trying to affect transformation?
Not yet here today. Security? I'd be glad to.
Yeah, can you run through it real quick?
Sir.
And I know you were formerly a politician, so try to be brief. I've only got 3.5 minutes.
Thank you. We have, in essence, within 30 days of the new year, actually on February 5th, we launched and had our very first meeting of a new performance management, agency-wide performance management regimen we call Security Stat. So they're kind of like a doubleheader Monday, doubleheader Tuesday, and then the following week, 2 more meetings on the Monday, 2 more meetings on the Tuesday, and then we rinse and repeat. So we've created an agile every 2-week cadence in a room a little smaller than this one. We have about 15 of the most relevant deputy commissioners around the table. And so for 1 blessed hour, we lock the whirlwind outside and we focus on field operations. We take a break, go across the hall to the follow-up room. We memorialize in the after-action report the things people agreed to get done within the next 2 weeks. One component might have lead. Maybe the legal counsel has an answer she needs to run to ground in order for policy to move and make a change. And then we go back across the hall and resume for the second hour. That focuses on HR. The next day, one solid hour on 800 number and so on.
I like the framework. How have people reacted to it? Because it's probably a little bit different framework than they've been accustomed to over the past few years.
It's very different in 2 respects. One is we've all kind of followed in, or maybe we've never gotten out of, the rut of annual budget cadence. Mm-hmm. You know, give me 1% improvement every year so we're not embarrassed at our budget hearing. So this isn't every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. The other way it's different is there was a culture of if you have an hour with the commissioner, you want to fill that hour up with 60 slides. The last one you present in the final 30 seconds, and it says, any questions? Mm-hmm. So instead, we really use the data, the maps, and the latest emerging information shared by all. It's live streamed to 220 members of the senior executive service throughout the country. And we usually, what we like to do, it's more like a jury. You know, you have about 15 people that focus on the latest evidence of how we're doing, what we're doing, and we ask the question, what are the things, the actions we can take to get a better result by the time we're back here in 2 weeks?
Give me an idea of what you've done to get out to the field and what's the reaction there? I'm assuming you've been out.
Yes, sir. Within the first month, in a 16-day period of time in the winter, I visited all 9 regions. Social Security Administration is divided into 9 regions. So every day was spent not only getting to know the command staffs of that region, not only doing a big town hall, but with employees listening, getting ideas, but sitting with people on the headset on the other end of the, call from a customer on the other side of the glass, divider in the field office. And I learned a lot. And we hit all of those in, like I say, in the first week of January. And it's made a big difference because some of the best ideas came from people that have been doing the job in frustration who felt like nobody was listening.
That's good to hear. I'm about out of time, but when can we expect going into a phase where you would present to the members, at least Finance Committee, if not the members at large, what you've found, what efficiencies you intend to drive out? You can just provide that for the record if you have a project plan. And I had another question that I'll just submit for the record in the interest of time. But thank you. And I believe that you just got to maintain that continuous feedback, get out there. And I also thank you for the policy that you've taken on having people to come back to work. There are some people I think who have been misinformed, thinking that you have not sent that message that half of success is showing up, or 90% of success is showing up. And I appreciate the fact that you're having your employees show up. Thank you, Mr. O'Malley.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when American workers pay for Social Security, I think they deserve to know that they're going to get the benefits that they earned. And that is why President Biden and Democrats in Congress are fighting to protect and to enhance Social Security, funded by making the wealthy pay their fair share. But today I want to focus on an issue that doesn't get much attention, and that is state governments seizing Social Security benefits for foster youth, often with the help of predatory private contractors. Now, some people might say, wait a minute, you're talking about children getting Social Security? Well, we have to remind people that 500,000 children are in the foster system, and some of these are children with disabilities who need extra care, which makes them eligible for supplemental security income. And many foster children have lost a parent who had worked and paid into Social Security, which would make these kids eligible for survivors' benefits. Commissioner O'Malley, you've worked in government your whole life fighting for working families, and now you head up the Social Security Administration. Do you agree that when a parent dies, a child deserves and often desperately needs the Social Security benefits that their parent earned?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the law says that Social Security survivors' benefits must be used in the child's best interest for unmet needs. And yet, if that child ends up in foster care, their benefits may be seized by state agencies that are responsible for taking care of them. States, with a little help from the federal government, fund the foster care system, but dozens of states are now secretly screening the kids in their care to see if they would be eligible for Social Security benefits, sometimes even hiring data mining companies to try to identify targets and then funneling those Social Security benefits into state coffers to pay for anything from paper clips to prisons. In 2018 alone, states took at least $179 million from foster kids, and in many cases, these children didn't even know that they were entitled to the money. Commissioner O'Malley, when I heard about this, I nearly fell out of my chair. Funneling a foster child's benefits into state coffers and not directing an additional cent toward improving that child's life, does that sound like it is meeting the legal requirement that those benefits be used in that child's best interests?
It certainly doesn't sound like the sort of policy outcome that any of us would like for kids in foster care, regardless of whether or not the law says legally they can.
All right. Well, I got even a question about whether or not the law says they can.
Okay.
The law is very clear that those Social Security benefits are to be used for that child. You know, and these kids are not rich. Quite the opposite. A few $100 a month could make a huge difference in the life of one of these children. Could pay for trauma counseling, specialized tutoring, save for college, save up money for a down payment on an apartment because they're going to get dropped from the system when they turn 18 and have nothing. So here's the good news, Commissioner O'Malley. SSA has the power to ban states from stripping away foster kids' earned benefits. So let me ask you, what are your plans to ensure that foster children's Social Security benefits are used for their own needs rather than siphoned off by agencies and for-profit data mining companies?
Yeah, we're taking another look at this policy. There are some 17 states, led by Maryland, that have either passed laws or are considering laws that would require a certain amount of those benefits be conserved for the child. There's probably a lot of states who would tell you that if a child is in foster care, they pay more than what the benefits are that that child is receiving. So they would argue with their lawyers that they are using it for care and maintenance, as indeed grandmother or another family member might for care and maintenance. But when we all know what terrible outcomes kids aging out of foster care have, and we know that at least for this portion of them who receive benefits, there's a better way, we should do what we must so that when that kid ages out of foster care, having had benefits, that they're not just given a pat on the back and their clothes in a plastic bag when they turn 18.
Well, I appreciate your attitude on this. You know, seizing the benefits that go to some of our most vulnerable children just to finance other parts of state government just isn't right. And I hope you will pick up all of the tools available to you at the federal level to make sure that those kids get what their parents were promised back when their parents paid into the Social Security system.
And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you. We're unpacking some of this. And, 34 of the states claim that they do conserve a portion of it.
Yeah.
But we're about to find out exactly how true that is in the research that we're doing.
And remember, you've got the federal power.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Warren, my state, Oregon, has led the country in protecting these kids, and I understand our staffs are talking, so we'll follow that up promptly. It is a serious, serious problem for these kids. Senator Hassan is next.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner O'Malley, for being here today. During your confirmation hearing in November, we discussed our shared concern over the high rate of agency error in the disability benefits determination process. I also understand that the agency is facing a significant backlog of claims, with more than 1 million initial disability claims pending, and the average claimant waiting nearly 8 months for a decision. As you know, agency error and long wait times put already vulnerable individuals at increased risk. What actions have you taken to address these challenges since being confirmed, and what tangible progress can Congress expect during the coming year?
And Senator, to understand the call of your question, when you say agency error, do you mean with regard to payments, overpayments, underpayments, or in the decision itself?
Just in the initial decision itself.
The Social Security Administration runs what I understand to be the largest public administrative adjudicatory body in the free world. Yeah. There are several layers of appeals. The one where we're experiencing the most stress, the greatest backlog, and we have suffered the greatest attrition and the greatest decline in average processing time is at the state DDSs. Some of them have as many as 30%, 40% fewer staff than they did before. And while we deploy with other cadres from other parts of the agency to try to bail out those DDSs, it's been a real struggle. That is why in the president's budget, we would allocate I believe it was $2.6 billion to bring the staffing at those DDSs back up. That's the most important thing we can do. We also, though, have developed some technologies that allow us to do a much faster job of curating, searching, and making a determination on the relevant aspects of 1,000 pages of medical records that should also shrink the time somewhat. Those are two of the most important things we are doing. I spoke before on the overpayments aspect. Maybe that plays in here, but the main challenge is that we have people just waiting way too long for an initial disability determination. If you're unsuccessful at that initial determination, there's another appeal in the same state office for the same 220 days or more, and then there's an appeal to the ALJ hearing. Our desire, what we strive to do, is better and more accurate decisions right up front, rather than have to wait through the waterfall or have people, delayed. If people should be on, we get them on, or if they should have an allowance, we should do that as early as possible, not as late as possible. I will want to add just one thing, and I know I'm carving into time here, but it is inspiring what this agency does for all of its understaffing and high workloads to do the fast, compassionate allowances when people are really hurting. And they do that, and they take pride, and they do it silently. They do it quickly, though, and they largely do it well for people most in need within 30 days.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know my constituent service staff would say that they've had some really good, constructive conversations and partnerships with people in your administration, but I do think that initial claim time is really, really important, and the longer it delays, the more it puts people who are very vulnerable and eligible at risk. I did want to turn to the overpayment and staffing issue, if I could. The next two questions I have are how your budget request can further the Social Security Administration's efforts to prevent those overpayments and improve customer service. Because compared to 1995, the Social Security Administration is currently serving about 50% more customers with fewer staff. This staffing shortage directly impacts customer service as well as payment accuracy. How does the administration's budget request address the staffing needs at the Social Security Administration, and is there specific funding dedicated to reducing overpayments?
Senator, thank you. Yes, in the president's budget, we would propose using $269 million to increase frontline staffing, $79 million in the teleservice centers to suffer a 24% attrition rate, and also $85 million to the processing centers. I mentioned, and as I said before, the 2 point, I might have misspoken, 2.6, 2.8 billion for the state DDSs. All of those, along with, improvements to technology, will help us to do a better job of catching overpayments sooner. As we've unpacked this issue of overpayments, we have come to the conclusion, based on the data, that we have not seen a big increase in the numbers of people that suffer an overpayment through no fault of their own. But because of our short staffing, it takes us longer to catch up with that overpayment. Right. And so the amount they owe is higher by the time we take care of it. And each of those 4 areas I outlined are a piece of getting that time down. 92% of Americans, when they're sent a notice that they have an overpayment, actually call us or go to their field office and say, people make mistakes, I'll repay it, let's work out something reasonable. But for those 8%, we've been treating them in kind of very heavy-handed and draconian ways with really bad consequences.
And that needs to change. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A moment of personal privilege. The staff member sitting behind me, Abby Bronson, this is her last finance hearing. She's going back to New Hampshire to work on housing policy, and I just want to thank her very much for her excellent work.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the good work as well. Senator Blackburn's next, and let the word go to the Democrats and Republicans. We are getting close to the end. The commissioner has been very patient, so there may be Democrats and Republicans who wish to still ask questions. We'll go with Senator Blackburn next, and then I'll have a question or two, but we're going to get this wrapped up pretty quick. So well, Democrats and Republicans, come if you're so inclined. Senator Blackburn.
Yes, thank you so much, and we appreciate the opportunity to have you before us and to talk about the President's budget. One thing that I want to go to is the trust fund. And I know that the Social Security Trust Fund is needing to be shored up. It's to be exhausted in 2033. And then what we have read, CBO estimates that the program will pay a 75% benefit in 2033. So when you were before us previously, you refused to take a position regarding what policy options should be explored to shore up the Social Security Trust Fund. So I'd like to know if you've settled on something, have you made recommendations to the President? Why didn't we see those in the budget?
Well, Senator, I don't know that I so much refused to take a position as I deferred to the fact that you're the power that gets to make that decision, not me. When the President has said many times that he believes once people make over $400,000, they should start paying into Social Security again. Others have had other times at which they believe that should happen. And there are proposals out there. Your colleague from Rhode Island was just talking before you came in about those things. So I will work, our actuary will work confidentially with any of you who want to look at the various dials, as Senator Cassidy describes them, that are necessary to be adjusted for long-term solvency of the system. It is true that we face, once again, a depletion event like we faced in 1982. It's coming on us faster, but that doesn't mean that there isn't the will in this Congress to come together and push that out for another 75 years. The actuary told me there were 2 things that messed them up that they didn't account for. One was the breadth of the recession, kind of the 2007 to 2010 recession. Mm-hmm. And they said the other thing that we didn't account for was this. When President Reagan and Howard Baker and Tip O'Neill asked us to set a level, for income, they said to capture 90% of earned income. But then tax reforms happened after that 1982 fix, so they ended up only capturing 82% of earned income because we were going with this notion that if you let wealth concentrate at the highest levels of our country, that'll make the economy better. Agree or disagree with that, the mathematical effect on it was to move that depletion date from 2050 to 2034. 2034 is the combined date. But And that can also change. The new actuary and trustees report will come out within the next 30 days. And, we'll, of course, share it with you.
Okay, that is good. Let me ask you this. Since you sit on the Board of Trustees for the fund and the discussions with the board, what has been their approach to the solvency issue? Because I know Senator Cassidy, he and I've talked a lot. There are things Congress will need to do. There are things the administration is going to need to do. So as the Board of Trustees has looked at this, what has their approach to the solvency issue been?
Well, this will be my first meeting of that board. I understand through COVID, they generally, got into a habit of kind of accepting the report on Zoom. That's not really the deliberative body, as I understand it. The actuary is your best bet for sure of someone that can call balls and strikes and score the various policy changes. But I don't believe we would ever meet to try to, to pretend that we're the policy-making body on that. That's your prerogative. But I really would love, nothing would make me happier during my time here than to be able to serve the members of this committee or Congress overall in achieving what Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did in their own day.
Okay. There have been a couple of mentions of staffing shortages and processing times. And we have looked at that. I found it curious in the president's budget. He has a national paid leave program that he's planning to have run out of Social Security. And you've mentioned difficulty in meeting the workload. You've even had something episodic telework, whatever that proposal is. But I would like for you to comment. Do you have the bandwidth to do a national paid leave program when your wait times have doubled since 2019?
We would have the bandwidth if it comes with the funding that I understand is in the bill. On our current staffing, no, we would not be able to do that. But if the additional funding that comes with that is there to administer it, we could.
And returning people to in-person work?
Yeah, let me talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The episodic telework, bit of a red herring. On February 2nd, I did an into-the-camera announcement to all of our staff and said, look, y'all, we are shifting now to a core collaboration days. What does that mean in effect? That means I'm in work 5 days a week, and the commissioner's office is 4 days of work, 4 days a week, one of telework. The field offices have been open 5 days a week, 9 to 5, ever since COVID ended. And their balance is an individual person is 3 days a week in the office, greeting customers, 2 days telework, where they get oftentimes a lot of their adjudicatory stuff done, the processing of the claims on the back end. And then in all of the regions, we also insisted that we be 3 days in the headquarters, even if you're regional headquarters, 2 days of telework. This episodic telework thing was, in essence, this. After I made that announcement, they said, well, what if somebody has a sick kid? Are you saying that they can't work from home when they have a sick kid and they have to stay home with that child? I said, well, we're not monsters. We're human beings. So, of course, they could do that episodic telework for a half day. Then our labor commissioner said to me, the unions, the organized workforce, is going to ask if they have it too. I said, don't they already? He said, no, they don't. I said, well, that's silly. And I had heard, because I traveled all around the country and all 9 regions did town halls. There was a young dad, I forget now, Kansas or San Francisco. He said, I had a sick kid, had to get him to an emergency room, but my wife was coming off of her job at noon. And all I said to my boss was, could I have the morning off and come give you a full shift in the afternoon in the teleservice center? And she said, no, we don't do that. And I said, well, that's stupid. Don't we want more people on the phones when we're suffering from a staffing shortage? Our lowest staffing in 27 years with the highest number of beneficiaries. But that's the point of that is, and unpacking that on your time, is that we have shifted to more people on site and that's across the
This is an
country.
important issue. We're just going to have to move on, and look forward to talking to my colleague and the Commissioner. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Good to see you,
Senator.
Commissioner. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Social Security is a solemn promise, as we know. People who have paid into it all their lives deserve to know that the government will protect that promise. I know that it's been threatened by efforts to privatize and to raise the retirement age and all the things that conservatives have done that doesn't serve the American public. I've heard a lot of concern in Ohio about Social Security overpayments. Senator Wyden, Chairman Wyden, Senator Casey, and I sent a letter last fall to the acting commissioner asking why so many people received overpayment notices in error and what SSA will do to fix it. Ohioans shouldn't pay the price, obviously, for government's mistakes. I'm pleased to hear the steps you're taking on your first 90 days to reduce overpayments. I mentioned that to you in some of our private discussions. So thank you for that, and we will continue to push on that and work on that. There are steps you as commissioner can take to reduce overpayments. There are steps that only Congress can take. I know you talked about bunt singles or something some Oriole fan might talk about. I know there's interest in both parties in this committee to working together to address the root causes of overpayments so that benefits are administered accurately and efficiently. When you were here in November, you called the SSI asset limit a leading cause of overpayments. You added that it presented a significant administrative burden for SSA. Tell us why you think the current asset limit is a burden, both for you administering it and for beneficiaries.
The asset limit has not been raised for years and years. The asset limit is $2,000. SSI is about 40%, or rather 4% of our benefit outlays, but it accounts for 40% of our administrative work. And that's because, as a means-tested program, we have to evaluate every month and make sure and make sure that no one in any given month goes over their allowable amount that they can have in as assets in a savings account or in earnings. So in essence, in the short term, if it were raised from $2,000 to $20,000, it's your bill, and compliments and kudos to you and your Republican colleagues, Senator Cassidy, and both in the Senate and the House, bicameral, bipartisan, to raise it. You should be very proud of that. Hopefully it's the shape of more common sense things to come. Eventually, probably, as we make it less burdensome for people to apply to the program, more people will apply closer and closer to that 20,000 limit edge. But the short term will be that it should reduce the incidence and numbers of overpayment.
Thank you. And it's just so important when you meet, one of the things the chairman's really good at is putting human faces on this. I mean, it's easy to go back home and talk about statistics and this isn't right and that number should be here and that cost of living adjustment should be built into it. But we did a little event outside the Capitol back. It was a hot day, I remember, so it was maybe July or August, in just September, and with a young woman from my state who wants to work, and she's worked as a greeter in a restaurant in Athens, Ohio, and she keeps bumping up against this asset limit. It makes no sense, and she is single. Raising it to 10,000 would make a huge difference, and that's why Senators Cassidy and Langford and Casey and Hassan have all agreed to sign on to this. It's just something we've got to commit ourselves to do. Remainder of my time, what progress are you making to simplify the SSI application process?
That's kind of the white whale of our administrative pursuits. People have been saying, in fact, I wish I had a dime for every time a person said to me, why don't you just have TurboTax for SSI? It's a complex problem. There's been a lot of work done on simplifying it. We were talking earlier about the declining numbers of kids that apply for SSI. I mean, the end game. The Social Security Administration has been very slow to embrace digital technologies, communicating with people via phone and text. As a result, a lot of our so-called modernization efforts or simplification efforts are really about taking paper forms and turning them into online forms, which is not really simplification. It might be electrification, but it ain't simplification. So we need to be building towards the end state of not just simply putting forms with a few fewer questions on them online, but we really need to simplify the program. We need to simplify communications to stay in compliance with the program. And I think our best bet for that is going to be digital and texting technologies. We're working on it. We're not there yet. A lot of the advocates did not like the first iteration we had because they thought it was exclusive. They believe we should make it simpler for everybody, not just for people that are wealthy and can afford to, navigate something.
Well, we're going
online.
to keep watching. Chair, the president of Richmond Fed one time said, keep watching what I'm doing and keep letting me know that you're watching me, and we will let you know regularly, white whale notwithstanding, that we're watching. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator, and for your leadership on this and so many things.
Thank you, Senator Brown, and you really have put a human face on this question of the asset limitations, and look forward to working with you to make sure this actually gets done. Commissioner, it's been a long afternoon, and I want to ask you about something. The fancy word for it, apparently, is effectuation. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what we think it is, because when I heard about it, I said, I'm going to bring this up with the commissioner. This came up, after we talked. So this is all kind of brand new. It seemed like it had been something more akin to a kind of secret backlog. And here's how it came to us. So there is a period between the point in which a Social Security awards benefits, in effect gives the thumbs up to a person, and when the benefit check is mailed or deposited in their account. Now, many of these, of course, are done very quickly and no kind of fanfare or anything like that. But we've come up against people who've been waiting for months. And here's the case in Oregon. We helped a mom in Medford, Oregon, with 3 kids who'd been waiting for 8 months for her disability benefits. By the time she got her first payment, she had basically drained all her savings and was at risk of losing her house. So we have not gotten into this. I had never really heard the word effectuation, and you and I have talked a bunch of times about how government jargon kind of consumes so much of this. And back in the day when I ran the legal aid program for the elderly, I used to follow all this. But what can be done, and I recognize this is the first time it's been brought up, what can be done to get on top of this so that people like the person we helped in Medford, Oregon, is not going to be clobbered this way?
Yes, sir. When we talk about the backlogs at the processing centers, those aspects of the president's budget that would allow us to bring down that backlog at the processing centers, I do believe that that's what you're hearing from people when they talk about effectuation, the time it takes to effectuation. They manage to survive and hang in there all the way through the hearing and the appeals and everything else, and then they're drumming their fingers for another 5 months waiting for the backlog at the processing centers to clear. We have a big backlog at the processing centers. There's no denying the fact that we've lost a lot of staff there as well. And that's why the president's budget is so important, to get us back up to that level of customer service so you don't have these cases. The backlog, the processing backlog, we would propose putting $85 million to address the processing center's backlog, which should help alleviate some of the waits that people experience in that. And I'm sure that there's probably more nuance to it, depending on what sort of effectuation it is. The effectuation for the retirees, as you mentioned, goes very quickly. Others are more complex. If it involves making a calculation in 2 programs, it can become even more complex than that. But it's that processing center backlog that we talked about earlier where the effectuations are most delayed.
With your leave, Mr. Commissioner, I'll have our staff start talking to yours. And look, you're making the case that a lot of people would be pretty skeptical about. that government can do smart stuff and government can do it well. And you have outlined a number of steps for us today in response to questions from Democrats and Republicans here on the committee that is going to set in motion, and you've done it in less than 100 days, some very substantial changes. So I want it understood that I think you're really off to a strong start in terms of righting wrongs. We got lots of stuff to do, and clearly trying to show that you're making a lot of progress is going to strengthen the hand of those of us who want to make sure you have the resources to do more and to get these policies up and running as quickly as possible. So we thank you for the senators. Questions for the record have to be submitted by next Wednesday, March 27th at 5 o'clock. Commissioner, it's been a long afternoon. Thanks for your good work. Thanks for your patience to respond to all these questions. With that, Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.